Daniel was the favorite advisor of King Darius and a strong believer in God. The other advisors were jealous of his favor with the king, so they made a law that no one could make a petition to any man or god other than King Darius. Daniel continued to pray to God and was so thrown in the lion's den overnight. God sent an angel to protect Daniel from the lions, and when Darius got Daniel out the next morning, he was unscathed. The popular allusion to this story is being thrown in the lion's den, meaning betrayal.
Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba is a very powerful woman. She goes to visit King Solomon, with the rule being she cannot touch Solomon as she is an unmarried woman. King Solomon also tells her that she cannot take anything of his. Solomon ends up tricking her by putting a glass of water by her bed, so when she drinks the water, she breaks the agreement accidentally. After they have broken the agreement, the Queen of Sheba sleeps with King Solomon, and when she returns home, she is pregnant. The Queen of Sheba herself is an archetype, which is how it's alluded to in other stories, usually as a powerful female ruler or founder of something. Elijah. Elijah was a prophet who opposed the fake god Baal. When the real God sent a famine at the country, Elijah fled to survive. Then Elijah faced off against the false prophets of the fake god by giving sacrifices, in which only Elijah's was accepted. Fire falls from the sky with Elijah's sacrifice, and since he has proven that his God is real, Elijah orders the death of the false prophets. He then prays for rain, and God makes it rain, signaling the end of the famine. Doubting Thomas. Thomas was the only disciple who wasn't present when Jesus was resurrected and went to see the disciples. When the others told him, "We have seen the Lord," he didn't believe them and insisted on seeing and touching Jesus' wounds. Later, Jesus appeared in front of them all and told Thomas to touch his wounds. Thomas did so and believed, and Jesus said, "You believed because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me."
15, Jesus tells about the youngest of two sons coming to his father to ask for his inheritance ahead of time. The youngest son would only receive 1/3 of his father's inheritance in accord with the Old Testament laws. He then took the inheritance and ran away to spend it all on having a good time, while his older brother stayed to work with his father. He had plenty of friends to help him spend it, but quickly ran out of his inheritance funds, and his friends left him. Then he was reduced to working in a pig pen, and the pigs ate better than him. For a Jew, to tend to pigs was the height of humiliation, since they were deemed unclean according to the Old Testament. He thought of his father's servants, who were at least fed well and had shelter at night. The young son had reached the end of his rope and came back home, intending to beg for a job as one of his dad's servants. He was accepted with open arms by his father. The older son was outraged. He was angry that his father had allowed his brother to return, and even more disturbed that he got a gift of a robe, a ring, a pair of sandals, and a huge feast in his honor, with the choice of the fattest calves. His father tells him to rejoice because his brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he's found. This story has a father-son conflict archetype, and the young son represents an anti-hero archetype. This story is still widely told today. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were known for their wickedness and bad laws, or lack thereof. God intended to destroy them. Abraham, God's servant, pleaded with God to spare the cities on behalf of any righteous people who may be living among them. God only found but one, Abraham's brother Lot. God still intended to destroy the cities, but on Abraham's behalf he sent 2 angels to warn Lot and get him and his family out of the city, with instructions not to look back. Lot's wife looked back and became a pillar of salt. God rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities were destroyed. In modern times, the story is where we get the word sodomy, which according to Webster's dictionary means anal copulation with another person or animal. This is a possible archetype for heaven and hell. Jezebel was a Phoenician princess who married Ahab, the prince of Israel. Eventually they ruled as king and queen together. Much to the Israelites' displeasure, instead of adopting the Jewish culture of Israel, she continued to worship the nature god, Baal, of her own country, and even brought 800 prophets of Baal to Israel with her. Many despised her for this. As a queen, Jezebel was known to falsely charge her subjects and have them stoned to death. Sometime later, the prophet Elijah arrived and told Jezebel that her fate was to be eaten by dogs. Sure enough, with an assassin after her, Jezebel was thrown out of a window and her body was devoured by dogs. Jezebel is famously known for anticipating her own death and preparing for it by applying makeup and dressing in finery. Jezebel may fit the temptress or devil figure archetypes. In modern culture, Jezebel is referenced in relation to cunning and ruthless women. Her name has also become synonymous with idolaters and prostitutes. According to the New Testament books of Matthew and Luke, an angel named Gabriel appeared to a young Jewish woman named Mary. Gabriel informed Mary that she would become pregnant with a son, who would go on to become the Messiah or Son of God. After traveling to the city of Bethlehem, Mary and her husband Joseph took residence in a stable, and there Jesus was born, and placed into a manger. Soon, 3 wise men saw the appearance of a God-given star and decided to follow it to Jesus, the newborn Son of God. In modern culture, the birth of Jesus is well known for being a virgin birth or an immaculate conception. The birth of Jesus is the birth of the hero archetype for most of the New Testament. He represents the highest aspiration of man.
The story of Lazarus. Lazarus and his 2 sisters are friends with Jesus. The sisters notify Jesus that Lazarus is sick. However, Jesus waits too long to help and Lazarus is dead. Jesus says that if they believe in him and have faith, he'll bring Lazarus back to life. After having faith in Jesus, Jesus brings Lazarus back to life. The story portrays Jesus as strong and a giver of life, and Lazarus as able to overcome great challenges. The story of John the Baptist. John was born to Elizabeth and Zacharias, and Elizabeth and Mary were relatives. She passed the Holy Spirit to Elizabeth, and she became pregnant with John. John would go on to spend his life preaching the word of Christ and baptizing people to forgive them of sins. John represents purity and obedience in the story. The Last Supper. Jesus and his disciples gather for a dinner. Jesus announces that someone will betray him. Then he performs miracles, creating more bread and wine. The Last Supper is foreshadowing to betrayal and shows sacrifice.
The story of Judas. Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus. He did this by kissing him on the cheek, which then told the guards who he was. The guards figured out that Jesus was Jesus. But Judas did this and he got 30 pieces of silver. And he was the first to die when he hung himself. Judas represents the highest sin, betrayal.
Crucifixion and Resurrection. After being turned in by Judas, Jesus was arrested and condemned by fellow Jews. He was tried under Roman governor Pontius Pilate, who found no reason to condemn him. However, the Jews insisted he be put to death, so Pontius washed his hands to show Jesus' fate was out of his hands. A popular allusion to this story is for someone to metaphorically say he or she is washing their hands, meaning he or she takes no responsibility for the actions and events that ensue. He was then turned over to the Roman soldiers, crucified, and put in a tomb. Oftentimes the phrase, "a cross to bear," means a heavy burden. 3 days later he rose from the dead, appeared to his followers, and ascended into heaven. The day of the resurrection is celebrated annually as Easter Sunday. 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. When the apocalypse begins, Jesus opens 7 seals that are on a scroll. As he opened each, a horse and rider appeared. From the first seal, a white horse came out, along with a rider holding bow and arrow and wearing a crown. He set out to conquer, and thus symbolizes conquest. Next, a red horse appeared, so the rider was given a sword and the right to take away peace. This rider symbolized war. When the third seal was broken, out came a black horse and its rider, holding a pair of weighing scales. This horse and rider represented famine. The last horse to appear was pale, and its rider's name was Death. This horseman obviously represented death.